This is the unit here. Just going to show you what's going on. That's the regulator, which you set your pressure here. This is blow down, system blow down here. There's the two little check valves that they kind of start up here and they just loop around through a check valve. They bypass the inlet. There's one on each side. That's to allow, when this is fully closed, it just lets some air go through initially to help build oil pressure, but that happens anyway when you initially run. But I think this is really just there to help with hydraulic wind, because if this thing was sealed up tight with that fully closed, we'd like to let little air get through to help take the hydraulic wind down from the air compressor. So that's the main compressor setting point. Up here on the minimum pressure valve, this thing when it's unloaded, effectively it kind of blows down to minimum pressure. So this is like another blowdown valve here that blows down. It's on the downstream side of the minimum pressure valve, so it basically lets off any excess pressure other than minimum pressure as it bleeds to blow down. So when it's in idle mode, that thing is just blowing off any excess air. So, this little regulator on this side as well, which is downstream on the other side of the valve. So this guy is, think of it as a pressure relief valve. So as this thing is sitting here the valve is closed in and it's not calling for any air, there's still air that goes in through these valves here that go around the intake, even though that's fully closed. So this is just there to manage that excess air that gets made through those when we and it just bleeds. It just comes in here. It's really just a heli pilot regulator, the same as what's on the intake, and when it gets to a certain pressure, it just blows it out the bottom. So that's kind of set, so it's around, we're maintaining around 155 psi, I think, in this case, but that's tailorable. You can vent off more or less. This little e-stop button is actually functioning like a remote stop contact to start and stop the compressor. We were just experimenting with that. It's an option that can be done. This is the main controller screen. So when you kind of boot up initially, it gives you an NCA logo and then it goes to the home screen. Generally speaking, there's the start-stop buttons here. There's an auto button here. This is basically, green one is for starting in manual mode. This is for starting in automatic mode. And then you've got throttle control here, and these are just really for navigating the menu. You use these keys. So if you start in manual mode, you end up just using these two to toggle your RPM up and down. You go above 1425, the compressor will start to load. So you have to kind of decide when it's warm enough to speed up, and when you speed it up, it'll start around 1200. It'll load, uses this solenoid to effectively let the intake work. So right now on the solenoid, it takes tank pressure and holds that intake closed, and then what we do is we take that away so that it has to run off the regulator that's over on the tank to manage the pressure. This guy down here. So the load unload function is really based upon speed. If you, instead of starting with this one in manual, this is the preferred way to do it for the customer. Just press the auto start button. What happens is it comes up, it goes through a sequence. It actually has a warm-up, 3-minute warm-up where it starts at 900 RPM. Then it climbs up after that to around 1300 or so. And then depending on what the pressure in the tank is, if the tank is low, it'll keep running the RPM right up to full RPM if needed. And once it crosses the 1400, it starts to load. The difference in the auto mode is it will not come out of load when it's running up and down. It'll kind of run from 1300 up to 2200. It'll stay running in that range depending on what the pressures in the tank is, if it's trying to make it. But it will always keep the intake loaded. If you want to stop the compressor, then you press, if it's in auto mode, you press stop once. It goes directly into cool down, so it's going to cool down for 3 minutes. You can let that expire. That's the normal way for things to run. If you press it again, it'll stop right away. So it's like, I need this thing to stop. You press it twice. If you've been running in manual mode, not automatic, you press it once, it just stops because there is no cool down mode in manual. You're just running it or you're not running it. You decide if it needs to be cooled down or whatnot. So as far as the screens go, this is a bit your basic, your home screen it comes up with. We can adjust what those parameters are easily on here too. We've also got engine load, oil pressure, fuel rate, fuel temp. We can put different parameters in there. The ones that are interesting to note, the gearbox pressure is actually the oil pressure. So in the oil system, which is next to it here, that's the filter, the main filter that's going to filtering the oil for the compressor. Just after, there's a sensor down in here that's measuring the oil pressure that's going to be injected back into the screw. It's called gearbox pressure here. And then the discharge pressure is actually the tank pressure, which is what we're measuring on top of the tank up here, this guy here. That's the tank pressure. So there are both warning shutdowns on those, they'll be in the manual. Pump housing temperature up here is actually the discharge temperature of the air end, which is the sensor down at the discharge of the air end, which is down here. And those are the kind of the main parameters. This screen, you can also see, this is kind of a screen about the throttle. So it's trying to get, the throttle control is aiming for 155 tank pressure. It's got a dead band of plus or minus 7 psi. So it's happy between 162 and 148. It gives you a bunch of other parameters here, but that's the key on that screen. There's a couple other screens here. There's an analog input status. You can look at what's being used and what it's being used for. Output status, it tells you whether things are on or off. Number 3 is the only one that's being used here, which is the output to turn on the load solenoid, which is digital output 3. Current status is off. That'll change if you're watching it when you're running. Relay, there's also some relays in there. One to crank the engine, one's ECU enable. 3 is a common alarm, which we've wired to the terminal strip, but doesn't have anything on it if the customer wants to use it. Digital input status, you can see this is the remote start contact right now. So we've been using this other e-stop. So it's not really an e-stop, it's just a signal to start or stop the compressor. If we break that circuit, this is now showing open here. I don't know if you can see this here. That's showing open. If I put that switch back, it'll change to battery negative. That's just a status saying where things are.